Well, welcome again to Growth Group. I want to talk about narcissism today. Narcissism, according to dictionary.com, is the inordinate fascination with oneself, excessive self-love or vanity. In other words, an attitude that says, I am first. Recently, I saw a Facebook post by a friend who said, I'm tired of trying to make everyone else happy. So, of course, advice floods in on Facebook, and most of it revolved around the idea of making yourself happy first. I guess the presumption is that if we put ourselves first, then we'll be happy enough to, when we choose to, for whom we think deserves it, make them as happy as we choose to make them in that moment. A very self-centered approach to life. And I think the interesting thing about narcissism or an I am first attitude is that we drift toward it. To be honest, we all kind of are leaning that way if we're not careful. We drift toward it, but at the same time we're repelled by it. We're repelled by it in ourselves and when we see it in others. It's like we really don't want to live that way, and we really don't like being around people who are really narcissistic, and yet we're drawn to it. You know, humility is kind of the opposite, isn't it? Don't you have higher levels of trust with someone that is truly humble? Don't you just inherently trust them more, or at the very least you like them more? But you know, narcissism isn't the only philosophy of life that is prevalent in our society. I don't know if you've heard of the I Am Second campaign. If not, you should Google it. Just iamsecond.com. In fact, if you do that, you'll find our own Wayne Simeon. I say our own, our Kansas boy, played for the University of Kansas and lives here in Lawrence. And Wayne had a radical conversion to Christ. It's well known. He talks about it a lot. And so he talks about it on this video clip. In addition to Wayne, there are other actors and athletes and people of influence and just ordinary people who are acknowledging that they are trying to love God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength, just like we've been talking about in this Blueprint series. This campaign is an attempt to show that living for God first and putting ourselves second is a much better way to live than putting ourselves first. But recently I heard about another way to approach this topic. Have you ever heard of the book I Am Third? Well, it was written by Gale Sayers. Gale Sayers played at the University of Kansas in the 1960s and went on to play for the Chicago Bears in the National Football League. He was known as the Kansas Comet, the greatest running back ever to play at the University of Kansas by far. He's a legend. He's an amazing runner. Once had a 99-yard run. Some of you who have been around our church for a while might remember Bob Scahan. I loved Bob. Bob's moved to Colorado and he's still a friend. I saw him not too long ago. And we were talking again about the time that Bob Scahan was quarterback for the University of Kansas while Gale Sayers was the running back. Bob would always tell me, I had one job. It was to take it from this guy and give it to that guy. I was a great quarterback, he said, as long as I remembered to hand it off to Gale Sayers. He was that kind of a player. Sayers played from 1965 to 71 for the Chicago Bears. He was a combination of speed, power, and elusiveness. A few years ago, I heard that Gale Sayers was perhaps living in my neighborhood. He was doing some work for the University of Kansas, and I would see who I thought was him out running in the mornings. I'm actually pretty sure it was him. One day I was running up 6th Street, and I was on one side of the street, and this man was on the other side, and I think it was Gale Sayers. Now, you got to remember, he's like 20 years older than me, but I got to confess, when I saw him, I ran a little faster, and I actually passed him. So, you know, the truth is, at this point in my life, I'm faster than Gale Sayers. Well, actually, I'm not even sure it was him, and so it may never be known if I outran Gale Sayers that day, but what is known is that Gale wrote this book called I Am Third. It is Gale's life story, including the story of his friendship with Brian Piccolo. In 1967, Sayers and Piccolo were roommates for the Chicago Bears, the first interracial roommates in the NFL. Their friendship became the subject of the made-for-TV movie Brian's Song. Sayers and Piccolo were devout friends and deeply respectful of each other. Piccolo helped Sayers through rehabilitation after a serious knee injury, and Sayers was by Piccolo's side throughout his battle with cancer until his death in the age of 26 in 1970. While writing his memoirs, Sayers chose to title it I Am Third, which was a reflection of his life motto: the Lord is first, my friends are second, and I am third. Loving God with all our strength is to acknowledge that I am not first, as narcissism proclaims. It's not even to say I am second. But loving God with all of our strength, I think, is to say that I am third. The Lord is first, others are second, and I am third. On Sunday, I talked about the fact that our strength is a gift from God for the good of others. God has blessed us with gifts, and He's producing fruit that is from Him. It is given to us, and it is to be shared with others. I read from 2 Corinthians 9, verses 9 through 11. Now He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will also supply and increase your store of seed, and will enlarge the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in every way, so that you can be generous on every occasion, and through us your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God. Did you notice in that passage? The resources are His. He supplies the seed. It is His fruit that He grows in us, and His gifts that He gives to us that we share with others. The results are His. He speaks of the harvest of righteousness. This verse reminds us that any good we do is a harvest that He produces, and the glory is His. It said our generosity results in thanksgiving to God. His resources, His results, His glory. But did you notice also that it said in the passage that we are enriched in every way? Here's what I want you to remember. This is the cool part. Being third means being rich, spiritually blessed beyond measure. We understand this, I think, as parents. As parents, the best thing you can do is put God first. Put your children second and yourself last. And don't complain about it. Because when you complain about being last on the list, you're really saying, I'm first. I'm just acting like I'm last. Putting your kids above yourself is important. But notice, it's God first, which means you're not first, but it also means they're not first. The best thing you can teach your kids is they're not first. They're second, which means sleepless nights as parents, right? Postponing personal goals and plans, working hard on your marriage. In fact, as parents, the best thing we can teach our kids is they're third. Maturity comes when they start to get that lesson. And parenting is successful when our kids transition to a mature mindset of God first, others second, and themselves third. Parenting is hard work, and it might break you down. It might break you financially, emotionally. But done with an I am third mentality, it will make you rich. You will be blessed. You know what? I am third is not the only place. Parenting is not the only place that an I am third mentality comes into play. An I am third mentality will help you discover the joy of being enriched in every way. It will avoid the dead-end path of I am first philosophy. It will take you further than even an I am second philosophy, as good as that is. It will enable you to experience the enriching life where God resources you, God produces results, and God gets the glory. Well, to kind of end things today, I want to just tell you about Alo Lippy. Many of you know her. Alo has been associated with our church for over 60 years. Her family has been a part of our church for even longer than that. Alo was a missionary for 20 of some of those years in Puerto Rico. And she was a teacher at Wesleyan Academy down there. And she loved those years of her life. If you ever talked to her, those were the best years of her life. She was an incredible teacher by all measures and accounts. Alo, early when I came here to Lawrence about 30 years ago, pulled me aside one day and said, Pastor Nate, I want you to know I'm praying for you and your family and our church, that God will do something amazing in our congregation. I honestly believe this with all my heart, that much of what God has done in the last 30 years is a result of those prayers. Alo was always kind and generous to others, always had a smile and a servant's heart. Recently, Alo has been diagnosed with dementia and is in a memory care unit and not able to come to church. A friend of hers from Puerto Rico found out about this and contacted me. And this friend used Facebook to sort of connect with a lot of the students that Alo used to teach, and sent these students through Facebook Alo's address. And these students have begun to write Alo cards, Christmas cards, just I'm thinking of you cards. Alo doesn't remember these students. She knows they're from Puerto Rico because they identify themselves, but these students that are now adults with kids of their own, now say things like, you were the best teacher I ever had. I remember your prayers for me. I remember when you led me to Christ. And when Alo remembers, and though her memory is being diminished, when she reads those, there's a smile on her face. You can tell there's a warmth in her heart. You know what's happening? She's being enriched in every way, just like the passage said. She's being spiritually blessed. Why? Because the resources that God gave Alo have produced a harvest of righteousness, results that glorify God. And Alo is enriched. And I'm thankful for people like Alo that model the I Am Third lifestyle. And it's my prayer that we will have that same mindset. That we at Connect Church will be people who say, I am third. God is first. Others are second. And I am third. And I believe if we live that way, the result will be we will be spiritually rich.
Well, Pastor Nate gave a couple of great examples of people who have a pretty good grasp of this mindset of I am third. And while these people give us glimpses of what this lifestyle could look like and the fruits it can produce, there's only one person who's perfected it. Me. Just kidding. It's Jesus. There are many examples in Scripture where he displays this. One that you're likely familiar with took place not long before his impending death as he was sharing the Passover meal with his closest disciples. Right in the middle of eating, Jesus, being the only person ever with unlimited power and authority, gets up from the table, literally puts on the clothing of a slave, gets down on his knees and starts washing his subordinates' nasty, stinky, dirt-caked, sweaty feet. Here Jesus sets the example of what it looks like to put others before ourselves. And then he commands all of us to do the same for one another. Henry Nouwen, who was a priest, prolific writer, and pastor, wrote a book titled The Selfless Way of Christ. In this book, he compares the concepts of upward mobility and downward mobility. Upward mobility is what our human desires and the push from society calls us to. It's the movement up in our status and power. He writes that it's difficult for us to even imagine ourselves outside of this upwardly mobile lifestyle. Our whole way of living is structured around climbing the ladder of success and making it to the top. Our sense of vitality is dependent upon being a part of the upward pole and upon the joy provided by the rewards given on the way up. Conversely, Jesus calls all of us to seek after downward mobility. There's simply no way around it if we earnestly seek to follow Christ. The path of downward mobility calls us to prioritize submitting to God's will and loving and serving others over our own desires for happiness, success, and power. We've been taught since we're young that the way to achieve happiness and joy is by seeking after what we want and by achieving success. The great paradox of the call of Christ is that the only way we can truly find this joy is by living in the I am third lifestyle. As Jesus said, anyone who does not take up his cross and follow in my footsteps is not worthy of me. Anyone who finds his life will lose it. Anyone who loses his life for my sake will find it. Of course, there isn't anything inherently wrong with success, progress, or strong leadership. But as Henry Nouwen says, there's a profound difference between the false ambition for power and the true ambition to love and serve. It is the difference from trying to raise ourselves up and trying to lift up our fellow human beings. So at this time, discuss with your groups what it means to follow Jesus' example and do for one another what he's already done for us.